when people are striving or struggling to survive, they can't dream.
Mm.
And I think part of the problem with most of us as developing countries is we're struggling to survive.
How does a micro, small, or medium-sized entity gets the eye of ITC?
All right.
Like
Well,
like these little ones
I
that you
know.
visit. Yes.
Well, what we do is, because we're an international agency, one of the things that I have committed to since I took over as well is more local presence. Because I don't believe in what I call helicopter technical assistance.
What is that?
You know, you're flying and you drop the thing.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
You're flying and you drop the package.
Okay.
And you fly off.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or you're flying and you stop a little bit and you know, and then you leave. No. I believe in embedding it.
Mm-hmm.
When you embed ownership, which you see
Yeah.
in those bars,
Yeah.
when people believe that they have a vested interest in the outcome and in the long-term benefits to accrue, it means that it will succeed beyond when we leave. And so that is my policy. That and COVID has really emphasized that had we not had people on the ground, our programs would have failed.
Yes.
Because we couldn't travel, we couldn't do it from there, but we had people, expertise, people who were committed on the ground. What we do is we work with entities like JAMPRO, like the SRC, like the JBDC, the PSOJ, RADA, all the entities that are involved, the Coconut Board, the Coffee Board, the Cocoa Farmers Association, all of these entities, we work with them to ensure that we have on the ground buy-in, presence, and the ability to execute, and that it will go beyond the stage where, the money is done, we're gone. No. What we're trying to do is build in long-term sustainability, and that's critical.
Are you of the view that the players who should make this come together, that there is sufficient understanding of what is at stake, and therefore the policy guidelines or legislative positions that ought to be taken to make it come to fruition?
Let me be fair. I was telling Cliff earlier today that I was watching this America's Got Talent, that thing with Simon Cowell and all. And there was a young man who came on, and he said, his first time he was going, I think he was a nurse. And they were asking him his story. And he said, I've adopted 6 kids. And one, I think, had cerebral palsy anyway. So adopted 6 kids, needy kids. And they asked him, why? Why would you, And his answer has really sat with me for a long time. And I think it is germane to what we're discussing now, and also germane to the wider developing country issue and the wider issue of why we are where we are. One of the reasons why I'm doing this is so my children can dream. He said, when people are striving or struggling to survive, they can't dream. And I think part of the problem with most of us as developing countries is we're struggling to survive.
So we can't see the big
We
picture.
can't dream. Dreaming takes a bit of space. You have to you can't be just, oh God, you can't be always in panic mode. And I think what has hit most of us as developing countries is that we have spent the last 40 to 50 years, at least since the crisis, the oil crisis in the 70s, struggling to survive. And I think it is not that there's a lack of understanding. It is not that there's a lack of awareness. It is that the breathing space to enable you to see the bigger picture and to connect the dots. Sometimes gets lost in trying, just like you were saying, as a single mother. So you're trying to feed your kid, earn a living. You're trying
and
to
do the job.
You're trying to just get stuff done. And so to be able to step back and breathe and realize, you know what, these are all connected. And maybe if I take a different approach, this is what will happen. But I do believe that we're at the stage now that we recognize, one, that it is critical, two, that the issues I mentioned are indeed priorities, and three, that there is what I call a coalition of the willing. There is a willingness for us to begin to bell certain cats. The established beneficiaries of a dispensation that has not necessarily been beneficial to us. Jamaica is a bit of an outlier, as we all recognize. Jamaica has the highest level of, I think it's fourth highest level of managers, women managers in the world. I think we're 54% or 56%. So, I mean, the incorporation of women in our space is not as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as absent as in other places, which are obvious. We have had a very strong matriarchal culture for a very long time, and we know this. But what I did find, and I think this is one of the problems in the Caribbean, we assume that because women are everywhere, and that we're pretty dominant, and that we do engage, and that most of us are, get the same education opportunities, etc. That we also have the equal access. It's true in theory, but not necessarily in practice. You look at the biggest private sector organizations, still male dominated. You go into many of these spaces, I meet with all men. You look at the economic, oversight, men. There are elements, yes, most MSMEs are still women, but they're MSMEs. And as a result, their access to finance continues to be a problem. They can't go into banks, they don't have the collateral, they don't get, therefore, the bank loans that the bigger guys will get or a male will get. They still do not own a lot of property or a lot of the tools of production or factors of production. It is harder for a woman to, even on boards, we don't sit in the control room. We may be in the managerial room, but we're still not in the control room. And so these are factors that we're aware of, but I do think that our approach in the Caribbean has to be tailored to the Caribbean. Because the reality elsewhere is very different. They're not even present. We are very present, but where we're present is the issue. And I think that is where we need to kind of tweak how we approach the issues in the Caribbean. I remember explaining when I was trying to launch the We Export when I was at Caribbean Export. I remember the pushback from my male colleagues was huge. They don't need it, no, nothing, Caribbean women don't get, no problem, blah, blah. And I said to them, let me tell you something. Do you know if I am to take my son out of Barbados today, I have to get a letter from his father? But he doesn't have to get a letter from me.
If he wants to take him out.
They were in shock. Seriously? I said, you guys don't know the little rules. There's some, just little things that you don't know until the policing of our dress to this day, whether we can wear sleeveless or not. It's sometimes just the little rules that you're not even aware of that have to be tweaked that enable us to have more access. But I will say that the Caribbean, especially Jamaica, is an outlier when it comes to women's economic empowerment. But it is still important because we are still not holding the majority of the levers of power in economics. The she trades is what we have now as ITC. We export was for Caribbean export, but she trades is and what we want to do is open a hub here, because there have been a lot of interventions for women. There's been the Women's Investment WINC, and then there's WENC, which is Women's Entrepreneurship Network Council, and then there's been We Export, and then there's been the UN Women, and there have been all kinds of different interventions. One of the things the minister mentioned to me, Minister Johnson Smith, was that is there a way that we could try to pull together all of those beneficiaries who have benefited on the JBDC, all various interventions, bring them all together and say, first of all, is it all the same people? Because we don't know. No, sometimes people multi-dip, right? Yeah. Or is it a group of big enough, and then we form a She Trades hub around that. Right. And then that hub, because through our She Trades hub, and you can look at it, we have capacity building, we have access to finance training, we have export market training, we have all kinds of different engagements that we can, and we're actually now launching a access to finance facility. It's called the She Trade Cares Fund, and that will also try to help funnel funding to women and women-owned businesses. One of the other areas we're looking at is the government procurement and getting a carve-out of government procurement for women-owned businesses specifically. One of the things Minister Johnson Smith said, however, is that she didn't have the data to justify that in the Jamaican case, because we don't know who actually accesses the government procurement contracts. Right. But we do know that they're between 20 and 40% of all government contracts, which says a lot, right? As a huge standing area that we could try to tailor, but we'll have to look at that. So one of the things I've committed to looking at is seeing how the She Trades hub could be established in Jamaica. We're working with CDB to establish a regional one. But given Jamaica's expanse of women and women entrepreneurs, it would be useful to pull that all together and have one major hub that could then build on the synergies and the benefits that have accrued.
I know it wasn't personal. I am assuming that it has to do with bullying against decisions for certain countries, for example, especially I'm thinking like Cuba and Venezuela. Explain that to me. When you say
I have zero tolerance,
right.
Let me explain the context.
Right.
It wasn't so much to do with countries. Okay. What has happened in the UN system more broadly, and even international system, is that the scourge of sexual harassment has been larger than we would like to admit. And I think you've seen it in the papers and so on. It's everywhere. Yeah. And so I was very clear that I do not tolerate in any form. And if it comes to my attention, it will be dealt with. It will not be swept under the rug. It will not be ignored. It will be dealt with. The same is true for bullying and discrimination. There are issues of mental abuse, verbal abuse. You know bosses.
Yes, I know.
You know what they can do. Yes. And because you are dependent on them for your income and for your livelihood, sometimes it gets to the point where people get significant mental health issues. And I've also indicated that, and I've actually set up, as of January, a mental health app for ITC, where we will have doctors on call 24/7. That people, and it's completely anonymous, so you can check in every day if you want with a mental health person who will then, and it's a pilot for 6 months to see how it works. But it's so important to me because I saw how many also young people have just suffered under COVID. They are alone. They have no family in Switzerland, isolated. It has been really, really more traumatic than people give it credit for. Yeah. And so what we've done is we've tried to see how we can begin to reach out and get them to respond and to engage. That's also an area. The discrimination, we actually have what I call a diversity and inclusion committee, which looks at issues of race. I mean, it's the UN. We'd like to think that race is not an issue, but race is always an issue. So we have one that looks at race, looks at gender, looks at disabilities, LGBTQI plus. And so we have an internal committee and group that is very active and looks at those areas as well to try to ensure that we're being honest about the realities. I've been interviewed about the realities of being a Black woman in what is a very non-Black space, and what the so-called microaggressions and how you deal with it and how you deal with being a mother. There are a lot of young mothers who have really suffered. It's been hard. It's hard to be a young mother, particularly in this field. And, so bringing my own experience to bear on being a mother, being a woman, being Black, and looking younger than I am, which sometimes is a disadvantage. It's the funniest thing. I never thought it would be, but people automatically assume, where's she going? Because
just like a girl. Yes.
When I have been here and everything I ask, yeah, man, it can be done. There's never anything I have asked that they've said it can't be done. Our warm, welcoming, engaging, everybody I know who has ever served here as a diplomat loves it. They would come back here tomorrow. That's the point. But the crime, why do you think so many of us are away? Most of us are away not because of economics. It is the fear that you don't want to raise your children in a scenario where you never know. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what drives a lot of people. And it's not that, people love snow or people want to be in it. It is that single factor. And I think that if we can address that, it will dramatically shift not only Jamaica's internal trajectory, but also how we are seen externally for investment and other purposes.
You're a traveling mom.
Yes.
How do you find time to relax and parent?
Well, he's now 21. He don't need me to parent anymore. But what I did do, and I always tell people that you do have to choose. So when I went to Barbados to Caribbean Export, well, I went with IDB first and then went to Caribbean Export. I had made a choice to leave the international world because the traveling was just too much. So I made that choice. And it was seen by many as a back, like a step back because I could have been at OAS and whatever else. But I needed that space. And sometimes you have to choose. You do have to choose. You're not going to get everything all at the same time. So I chose those 8 to 10 years to do that. Once he was at the stage where I felt, he's good. Then I accepted the opportunity to go to the UN. And that was how I did it. But I always also made the point that he was my priority. So I would work morning till 6 o'clock, head home, have dinner, do his homework with him, do whatever needs to be done. After he's gone to bed, I would then start back. The traveling was tough because, but sometimes I'd just take him with me. We just hang out, see different places, have the opportunity. But it is hard. I would not tell anybody that it is not hard. It is hard. And no matter what anybody tells you, this is my last statement on this. And I discovered this, unfortunately, a little late. But anyway, no matter what happens, even if you have a Renaissance father, right? Renaissance man, cooks, cleans, looks after children, you're still mom. And how I found this out was when Matthew broke his arm. And after he broke his arm, he was 11. And it was his first week of high school, and he broke his arm in football. And his dad was there, and his dad picked him up and going to the hospital. And he's screaming, he wants mom. And his father said to him, but I'm here. What? He says, mom makes it feel better. And at the end of the day, whatever it is, maybe because we carried them, but there is a direct link between nurture and care and mom. And it's not an indictment on the father. It just is what it is. He'll be sitting there beside his father and call me in Switzerland to ask me. I said, where is it, Dad? Right here.
He's asking mommy.
Seriously.
Yes, your mom.
But you know, it just, and my mom just passed,
Yeah.
and therefore it's the same thing. It's your mom. There's just something. So yeah, it is hard. I would not. So I'm also very, very flexible with my working moms, and try to ensure that we balance as much as possible. That, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.